Number 5 on this list is the dybbuk box. This is an evil box that tormented many people and even claimed some lives along the way. Zach Baggins writes, according to Jewish folklore, a dybbuk is a dark spirit that takes over the bodies of living people and uses them for evil. Legend has it that a dybbuk can be trapped inside of a box and prevented from causing mischief unless the box is opened, that is. Several years ago, the dybbuk box came up for sale on eBay. The seller listed a vintage wine cabinet that came from the estate of a woman who survived a World War II concentration camp. The seller, an antique dealer named Kevin Mannis, claimed that the first owner's granddaughter was terrified of the box, warning him that her grandmother said it held a dybbuk. After buying the cabinet, he was plagued by a series of unfortunate events and recurring nightmares of an old hag that would brutally attack him, causing him to wake up with bruises on his body. He also experienced an overpowering stench of cat urine in his home. Tragically, his mother suffered a stroke while opening the box. Not surprisingly, he decided to get rid of it. The box eventually ended up in the hands of Missouri Medical Museum director Jason Haxton, who was skeptical about the powers attributed to the box. He soon changed his mind. After acquiring the box, he began to experience a series of medical maladies, including bleeding eyes and strange rashes. He also began to dream of being attacked by an old hag and would also awake with bruises on his body. Kevin Mannis told me that while the box was in Haxton's basement, a man died there and his body was found lying next to the box. He eventually became so unnerved by the box that he reached out to scientists and rabbis who instructed him to build a wooden ark lined with 24-karat gold, place the box inside, and bury it in the ground. Now, this actually wasn't the end of the story for this box. The box was eventually dug up again and then later donated to a museum. This was after it had tormented a few more people, mind you, though. Now, it's fully encased in a glass covering, but even that doesn't stop the evil spirit from coming after people. Many people who have visited this box have reported having serious episodes in the room while they're looking at it. Whatever spirit is trapped inside this box, it is clearly an extremely powerful one. The box remains on display at the museum, but I wouldn't recommend going to check it out if I was you. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Rocking Chair. The Devil's Rocking Chair is actually from one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's most famous case, The Devil Made Me Do It. Zach Baggins writes, the horror began in July 1980 when David Glatzel, 11 years old, became possessed by a demon. One night he woke up screaming, claiming that he had been visited by a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features, jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. David was, everyone agreed, not the kind of kid who liked scary movies or who was likely to make things up, and he was visibly shaken up by this experience. He became rather withdrawn and quiet. His older sister, Debbie, asked her fiancé, Arn Johnson, if he would stay with her family for a while and see whether it would help David get out of his depression. Arn, of course, agreed, but things didn't get better. David reported having more nightmares about the terrifying man who promised to take his soul. Odd scratches and bruises began to appear on the boy, and all the injuries seemed to happen while he was asleep. Odd sounds, which Arn couldn't explain, were heard in the attic. Worst of all, David began to claim that he was now seeing the beast while he was awake. He was always seen sitting in the family's rocking chair, which the beast now claimed as his own. David was the only one who saw the beast in the chair, but family members often saw it rocking back and forth, seemingly under its own power. This was obviously a lot, so the Warrens were brought in to perform the exorcism. The exorcism took place in that rocking chair, and it's thought that the chair itself still has some evil energy from this spirit attached to it. Now the chair resides at the Haunted Museum, but owner Zach Baggins actually took the exhibit down because the chair was simply too dangerous, he thought. Number 3 on this list is the Maori warrior masks. Now these warrior masks hold a curse that won't affect everyone, just a small portion of people. Specifically, women who are soon to be expecting children. The Occult Museum says New Zealand's Maori warriors are part of an ancient ancient tribe who would carve unique masks when it was time for battle. When a man died in the mask, it was believed that his soul would remain trapped in the mask they were wearing. Although their mythology does not dictate that any harm is done by the trapped souls, the presence of the masks has a strange and sometimes fatal effect on pregnant women. Women who are expecting often experience complications when they come in contact with the masks. It's unknown why this phenomenon occurs, but the museum that holds the remaining masks posts a warning that pregnant women should stay away. The literal museum is out here warning pregnant women not to come. That's how you know that this thing's seriously dangerous. Like whenever a business or enterprise does something that's actually gonna lose them money, that's when you have my attention. Considering they just lost an entire demographic of people, I'm now listening and buying into this curse. The paranormal investigators who aren't pregnant have taken a look at this, and they're having a hard time getting to the bottom of it. Some people have suggested that the Maori tribe thought that pregnant women were taboo, but that also doesn't really make any sense, because then how would they have repopulated their tribe? Regardless of why it is the way that it is, just know that if you are expecting, that's not the right time to take a look at these masks. Number 2 on this list is the Surrey ghost car. So this is a weird one and definitely something that paranormal investigators are a bit spooked by. List 25 says crashes are common on the A3 highway in England, so it looked like a routine matter when police in Surrey received calls that a car had veered off the A3 with its headlights blazing. But when officers went to investigate, they found no signs of the reported vehicle. However, a further search revealed chilling results. Just 60 feet from the reported crash scene, and buried in twisted undergrowth, was the remains of a wrecked car containing a decomposing body of a young man who, as the police estimated, had crashed there 5 months earlier. Therefore, what the witnesses reported might have been a ghostly apparition of the original car. Now, how on earth does that make any sense at all? You know what, let me answer that for you. It doesn't. First off, how did no one notice this car earlier? And then, what was that ghostly apparition that had a car veer off the road? Paranormal investigators are all scared of this one because who knows what type of effect this ghost car could have on your vehicle. And finally, number 1 on this list is the cursed mirror. This mirror isn't just cursed with a bad reflection, it's gonna show you something a lot worse than just you with a little bedhead or something. Instablog says, if you've seen Oculus, then chances are already you're scared of mirrors. And let's not even go back to the time when Bloody Mary was a whole thing. But if these creepy images of mirrors in the horror genre weren't enough, here's a real object which is most likely cursed. In St. Francisville, Louisiana, there's a plantation house which is one of the most haunted houses in America. Inside the house is this mirror, a cursed mirror. Legend goes that the plantation slave brutally killed the owner of the house, named Sarah Woodruff, and her daughters inside the house. Ever since then, they remain trapped inside the mirror. Visitors often report sights of handprints on the mirror, along with some unexplainable strange marks. And the classic haunting is also rumored: figures dressed in white, old-fashioned attire, visible on the other side of the mirror. Some people who have been exposed to this mirror for longer than they should say that these figures in white follow them around too, that they've even seen them appear in other mirrors outside of the plantation, and 1 or 2 of them have talked about how they've seen them outside of a mirror entirely, as if they were standing like right in front of them. It seems like the longer that you're exposed to this, the more of an impact the curse will have on you. Kind of like, I don't know, radiation poisoning or something like that, where the time you spend among the toxin, that's gonna hurt you more. Obviously, because of this, paranormal investigators don't want to spend too long investigating this mirror. A short stint doing some research probably won't hurt you, although it will definitely give you a scare considering you're gonna see the figures on the other side. But extended exposure is where the real danger lies with this cursed item.
Starting off this countdown, we have Mary Todd Lincoln's dress. This beautiful dress was once owned by Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife. It's a beautiful purple velvet dress with satin and lace detailing. She wore this dress during the Washington winter social season in 1861 to 62. But here's the thing. After After her husband's death, Mary went into mourning for a long period of time. In fact, she stayed in widow's clothes up until her own death in 1882. So she had no use for this dress anymore. So she gave this dress and some of her other items to her family members. This dress was given to her cousin Elizabeth Todd Grimsley. In 1916, Grimsley's son sold the dress to the Smithsonian's First Ladies collection. And now, apparently, it's haunted by Mary Todd herself. People have heard weeping when they have been near this dress. On a number of occasions, they have actually seen Mary Todd Lincoln's apparition by the dress. Thankfully, she means no harm. But if you think about it, it's quite sad. Even in the afterlife, she's still mourning over the loss of her husband. Hopefully, she can eventually find peace and reunite with him. Moving on to number 4, we have the Smithsonian. One of the most haunted items in the Smithsonian is the museum itself. It is haunted by a number of ghosts. As a result, they actually offer ghost tours on location for people interested in the paranormal. On a number of occasions, workers have seen past Smithsonian scientists who would work on the collections there. But the most active ghost is that of the Smithsonian's first curator and second secretary, Spencer Fullerton Bard. Almost all of the night guards at the Smithsonian have seen his ghost wandering the halls. They see him gliding through the halls, people try to talk to him, and then he disappears into thin air. Then you have the ghost of Secretary Joseph Henry, that also likes to show his face around town. According to the night guards, they said, and I quote, "Henry is often seen fully clothed in the garments he wore in life, walking through the exhibits before returning to his post. His post being the statue the museum has in place for him." Dude, what in the night of the museum is this? Seriously. Then you have the countless unidentified entities that also haunt the halls. These are just like black shadowy figures people have seen in passing. At least it seems like these ghosts mean no harm. Like, sure, it's kinda spooky, but at least they aren't malicious. Also, hit that thumbs up button if you want to see me go ghost hunting at the Smithsonian. I'm down. I'm down.
Number 3 on this list is the Hope Diamond. Don't get me wrong, guys, I would love to have this thing, but I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze here. Google Arts and Culture says, one of the most famous diamonds in the world, the Hope Diamond, originated in the Kolar mine in Andhra Pradesh, India. According to legend, the stone is cursed and brings misfortune to anyone who owns it. The curse is said to have come about when the original diamond was stolen from the eye of a statue. The thief met a grizzly and kick-starting a pattern of misfortune for all those who possessed the diamond. Over the years, owners of the Hope Diamond have befallen fates including death by murder, execution, they've taken their own lives, bankruptcy, and imprisonment. Thankfully, the curse seems to have been lifted when the diamond was donated to the Smithsonian in 1958. Now, I don't really buy into the fact that this curse is lifted, in my opinion. Like, literally, if you own this diamond, then you die or someone you love dies. That's what's happened throughout history. In the best possible case scenario, you just get hit with like horrible luck and lose all your money or some other horrible thing. There just really isn't any good way to spin this. Owning the Hope Diamond is pretty much a horrible idea. Number 2 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. Do not get on a boat if said boat is also carrying this mummy. Google Arts and Culture says the Unlucky Mummy isn't actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of a high status woman who lived in around 950 to 900 BCE. Discovered in Thebes in the 1800s, the 4 young Englishmen who first purchased the mummy all died in unfortunate circumstances. Rumors of the curse soon spread, and in the early 20th century, journalist William Thomas Stead wrote an article on the jinxed artifact. Stead went on to be one of the passengers on the doomed Titanic. It's said that he told stories of the curse in the run-up to the disaster, with many believing that the mummy itself caused the ship's watery end. Today, the Unlucky Mummy is on display in the British Museum. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Enter in the Unlucky Mummy and boom, now the unsinkable ship goes down. Maybe it's a stretch to say that this thing caused the literal Titanic crash, but I can at least guarantee that it probably didn't help. At least this thing is now locked up in a museum very much on land and not connected to any boats that I know of. And number 1 on this list is the Hands Resist Him painting. I'm all about having some some cool, groundbreaking art, but this painting definitely crosses the line. The lineup says there is no doubt the painting is disturbing. It shows a young boy standing next to a girl doll with hollow eyes and a sad, downturned mouth. The doll is holding a strange device with wires coming out of it. The eeriest part of the painting are the many disembodied children's hands reaching toward the boy through the glass panels of a door just behind him. But even more disturbing than the painting itself are the stories of what has happened to people who come in contact with it. A few years after the painting was sold, the art critic Henry Seldes died. Then the gallery owner died. Then in 1984, John Marley died. The painting disappeared, not surfacing again until 2000 in a bizarre posting on eBay. The new owners were trying to sell it because they said it was haunted. They claimed the boy and the doll in the picture would fight with each other during the night, terrifying their 4-year-old daughter. They set up a motion sensing camera in the room for 3 nights and claimed they had captured the boy in the picture leaving the frame and coming into the room, apparently fleeing in terror. The literal kid in the painting is leaving. Not freaking cool, guys. My paintings are supposed to be static and not moving, and they definitely aren't supposed to be walking around my home scaring the living bejesus out of me and my family. Apparently this painting is locked up in a storage locker now and no one is allowed to see it.
Number 5. The Pearls of Death. We know the Warrens. If that name doesn't sound familiar, check out some of the other vids on who they were on this channel. They were a pretty spooky duo. They've seen some nightmarish stuff in their time, and still have some proof of the evil that they vanquished. Their son-in-law still runs the official occult museum website and museum out of Monroe, Connecticut. Now, if you've seen Annabelle Comes Home, this first item on the list should ring a bell. The character Daniela in the movie tries to communicate to a loved one beyond the grave. Never a good idea. Unless you're with the Long Island medium, you know? Stick with the professionals. In order to do that, however, she puts on the museum's mourning bracelet. Yeah, that's not really a good idea there, Daniela. Now, there isn't really a mourning bracelet in the real occult museum, but there is such a thing as the Pearls of Death. And as of now, the Pearls of Death still have yet to appear in the Conjuring franchise. But they're notoriously one of the most dangerous items in the Warrens Museum, says their son-in-law, and very, very real. Beautiful accessory, I should add, but a very haunted and spirited set of pearls. They were added to the museum after a woman claimed that they were constantly strangling her. The Pearls of Death are said to strangle those who wear them. Now, I know what you're thinking. Get a bigger size, right? Well, it wasn't the wrong fit, per se, but like, choked aggressively. The story goes, the second that this poor woman put on these pearls, she literally needed people around her to even yank the pearls from its death grip around her neck. Yo, that is terrifying. Sometimes when I sleep with my chain on, I feel like I'm in a triangle choke in the UFC. But thankfully for us, the curls currently rest on the Warren shelves, where they'll hopefully stay for the foreseeable future. Tony Spera, the son-in-law of the Warrens and current owner-operator, says, it all goes way back with the cursed objects. Objects that someone put a curse onto. It could be a bracelet, a necklace, or any article that someone performed incantations and rituals over to put bad energy into, as someone or something famously did to the Annabelle doll. I feel like just talking about it, she's gonna show up. In the same way a priest can bless a holy relic, a satanic worshiper or black magic practitioner can curse a belonging, as seen with the Pearls of Death. Number 4, the werewolf paw. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, hit that like button or feel free to leave us a comment down below. Let us know which James Wan Warren story is your favorite. I mean, nothing beats the David's exorcism scene in The Conjuring 3. Yeah, spoiler alert, it's uncomfortable to watch. Some of you will get it. Scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, I swear to God. However, in Annabelle Comes Home, we see another terrifying object just chilling on the shelf. A werewolf claw. Later in the movie, we even see a real werewolf demon thing outside the Warrens' house. And of course, according to Tony Spera, the werewolf paw is a nod to the real 1980s werewolf case that took the Warrens all the way to London, England. A true story of demonic possession, and not just normal demonic possession. That's a weird sentence to say out loud. But we know about this case. Apparently, they watched a television program, Sightings, and police officers and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a real local werewolf, the infamous Bill Ramsey. They said his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a connection to him, and after traveling to London, she found Bill. According to Lorraine, he was possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed a full-blown exorcism. The exorcism was a success on American soil, and Bill was able to return home, ready to to start the rest of his non-lycanthropic days. He wouldn't grow hair or change at a full moon, but he used his fingers like claws, attacked people, and even would run around on all fours. Could this wolf paw in the museum be responsible for the werewolf case in London? I think it might.
In our third spot today, we have the ancient Egyptian treasures. Rumor has it that a number of treasures or artifacts from ancient Egypt are cursed. I mean, you all know about King Tut's curse. Well, there are a couple of items in the Smithsonian from ancient Egypt that are definitely haunted. For starters, we have the scarab. This scarab is believed to be from King Tut's tomb. For starters, it is believed that bad luck will fall on anyone who handles King Tut's body or other artifacts in his tomb. Everything in there is believed to be cursed by King Tut himself. I'm sure you've heard of the story of Howard Carter and his team that excavated the tomb. After doing so, several of the people involved died suddenly and mysteriously, so it's believed that this scarab is cursed along with the other items there. And then we have the mummified cat head. Yeah, you heard me. Now this one actually isn't from King Tut's tomb, but a woman named Mab B. Nylon donated a cat's head. Yeah, just the head. Who knows where the body is? Hey, maybe she kept it for herself and it's on display in her house. I'm not gonna judge. Anyways, this creepy thing is a preserved mummified cat's head wrapped in linen. Inside contains a real cat skull. Well, according to a number of workers, they have seen a ghostly cat apparition move around this display. This damn ghost cat is probably out looking for the rest of its body. This cat has also been seen wandering the halls and in several other exhibits as well. Moving on at number 2, we have the Black Aggie. This all started back in the 1800s when a woman named Marianne Hooper Adams, known by her friends as Clover, sunk into a terrible depression. As a result, she drank some of her photography developing chemicals and took her own life. After her death, her husband commissioned a sculptor to make a memorial statue of her. It was named the Adams Memorial, and later Black Aggie. But because of how it looked, people called it Grief, and that's when this creepy legend surrounding it was born. Legend goes that if you stare into her eyes long enough, they'll open up and start glowing red. Those that see her eyes will either be killed by her or she will cause you to go blind. Not only that, if you sit on the statue's lap at midnight, then you will die within 2 weeks. It's also said that pregnant ladies should never go near her. If they do, she will cause them to miscarry. Of course, this is just a creepy legend, right? Well, supposedly there's real life stories of this haunted statue taking people's lives. One man put a cigarette out on the statue's hand and he was later found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Another man was found dead at the foot of the statue and no one knows his cause of death. Now, you may be wondering how the statue got to the Smithsonian. Well, because of the legend, a lot of people were breaking into the cemetery at night to visit it, and it was often vandalized. So the family donated it to the museum where it remains to this day. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Hope Diamond. This is a very beautiful diamond from India, but here's the thing. It was stolen from India, and then a curse was placed on it. Back in 1792, the Hope Diamond was part of a Hindu statue. It was one of the idol's eyes. And then somebody went in and took the 115-carat diamond out. Upon discovering that the diamond was stolen, priests put a curse on it. The curse was said to affect anyone that put their greedy little paws on it, which turned out to be a lot of people over the years. And guess what? Bad luck befell to every single one of its owners. It's said that the man who stole the diamond shortly came down with a raging fever and died shortly after. Legend continues on saying that his body was ravaged by wolves. Continuing on, King Louis XIV bought the stone and had it recut in 1673. He died of gangrene, and all his legitimate kids died early on in life. Then we have Marie Antoinette. Apparently she wore it as well. And we all know how bad things ended for her. Another story involved an heiress named Evelyn Walsh McLean. She bought the Hope Diamond and everyone around her started to die mysteriously. First it was her mother-in-law, then her son, then her husband left her and later died in a mental hospital, and then her daughter. She later sold the diamond to get rid of this curse. That's not even half the people affected by this diamond, like the list goes on and on. Now the haunted diamond is on display at the Smithsonian. Hopefully no one will ever try to steal it because we don't need to relive its curse over again. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below which one of these haunted objects you found the creepiest.
In 5th place, we have a satanic idol. This story began in 1991 1991 when a deer hunter was walking through the woods in Connecticut, close to where Ed and Lorraine resided. The hunter got lost and after some time stumbled upon a raised, circular rock formation with the idol in question standing in the middle of it. It is believed that the formation was common with folks who practiced devil worship in the 70s. The hunter began to feel uncomfortable and left the area, deciding to make his way back to his car, and along the way he noticed an elderly gentleman walking alongside him who was dressed in head-to-toe black. The man in black never spoke a single word to the deer hunter. Now the hunter was getting more nervous by the second, and also more lost, and unsure of his directional path. Desperate, he turned to the mysterious figure and simply asked, "How do I get out of here?" Luckily for our narrator, the man in black pointed in a direction and then disappeared. The hunter was so thrown off by that day that he reached out to Ed, who requested to be brought to the same area. Now the hunter wasn't 100% sure he could find the exact location, but was willing to try. Together, the two men were able to stumble through the forest, and without the aid of the man in black this time, found the rock fountain. Ed removed the demonic idol from the area and placed it in the museum, and that's when things got a little weirder. Approximately 3 days after removing the idol, Lorraine collapsed for no known reason, and she was transported to the hospital where no one could identify what was wrong with her. Thankfully, after 3 more days, she recovered. Now Ed believed that this was caused by the gentleman in black, who was believed to have been a high priest in a satanic cult, as a form of payback for removing the satanic idol. In 4th place, we have a conjuring book. So one night, after returning home from a night out with Ed, Lorraine was reviewing the calls left on the answering machine when she found one from a distraught woman who introduced herself as a Mrs. Sandy Foster, who nervously described a very distressing situation and begged the Warrens to return her call. So even though it was like 12:40 in the morning, Lorraine immediately tried to call her back, and while the phone rang continuously, the connection was broken. Lorraine tried a few more times, going so far as to contact the phone operator and the operator's supervisor, who ran tests on the phone line and frustratingly didn't find anything weird. The next day, when the Warrens returned home from church, Lorraine immediately phoned the Foster home again. This time, Mrs. Foster answered the phone on the second ring and mentioned that the phone had never rang the night before, and Lorraine made the decision to go pay the Fosters a visit that afternoon. She and Ed arrived at around 2 p.m. and met not only Mrs. Foster and her husband, but also their 3 offspring, Abby, Joel, and Hannah, who had experienced most of the phenomena. Ed arranged his recording gear on a nearby table while Lorraine asked her permission to walk the house, which she was immediately granted. Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg, the 3 offspring, Abby, Joel, and Meg, who had experienced most of the phenomena. Ed arranged his recording gear on a nearby table while Lorraine asked her permission to walk the house, which she was immediately granted. Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg had always been interested in the occult and had purchased a book on conjuring as a gift for Meg, and based off of the description Ed gave of it, I believe it was a copy of the Ars Goetia. Now Meg admitted to attempting to summon a few of the spirits in the book, but had lost hope because nothing had happened. Ed prompted further, asking for specifics on the experiences that had happened in the last week when only the younglings were home. So, let's set the scene. The boys were already in bed, and Meg had just taken a shower. After going downstairs to make sure the doors were locked and, the lights were off, Meg returned upstairs to the sounds of running water, and the faucets had turned back on without any human's touch. Now downstairs, the lights and the radio had turned back on as well. Meg went downstairs and watched the radio dial moving on its own. After turning it off again, she got halfway up the stairs when she felt an icy cold hand touch her on the shoulder, just for a second in the dark. Now Meg bolted up the rest of the stairs, into her room, shut the door, turned off the lights, and hid under her covers. Outside the door, sounds of heavy footsteps caused her to suddenly shake under her covers. And then, more noises joined in with the mysterious steps. A door downstairs slammed shut, accompanied by furniture being pushed around and crashing, almost as if an angry person had broken into remodel. When Meg was able to open her eyes again, she saw a silver light come out of the woods and glide into her room. The next thing she knew, some hand yanked her hair 3 times. Each time it pulled harder, until the 3rd time it made her eyes water. Now, she ran into her brother's room for safety, and he confirmed that he was also terrified by hearing the assorted unknown noises, accompanied by loud whispering he could not make out. The duo eventually gathered enough courage to call their parents at the home they were at, but by the time the adults returned, all of the paranormal action had paused, and they were convinced the offspring were making it up. On the second occasion, everything that happened was almost the same as the first, but this time they involved the family dog, who was snarling at something that no one could see. Now, Joel remembered it as strange because the dog was deaf and could barely hear noise. So when the Wards were hiding in a bedroom on this occasion, instead of a silver figure, they saw a dark purplish cloud that they were unable to look at directly. So Lorraine at this point had returned and reported that she had experienced an inhuman presence throughout the home and asked Meg if she possessed, black conjuring candles in her room. And when she responded yes, Ed told the family that he and Lorraine can handle everything, but they should maybe head out for a drive while it was happening, for safety. Ed and Lorraine got to work the moment the Fosters left, determined to discover the true nature of the spirit's presence in order to dispel it. For provocation purposes, Ed used a crucifix and holy water, scattering the water at all 4 points of the cellar floor, and saying aloud, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command all spirits, whether human or diabolical, to leave this dwelling and never return." On the first floor, Ed repeated the same procedure in each of the rooms. This process, known to any exorcist as binding, requires the infesting spirit to either show itself or Move on. Having bound the cellar and all downstairs room without incident, the Warrens were ready to approach the second floor, where they knew difficulty was lurking. But as they prepared to act, a telepathically projected feeling of dread came over them, which is a distinct indication of an inhuman demonic presence. They pressed on and began climbing the staircase to the second floor. But as hard as they tried, neither Ed nor Lorraine could get any more than halfway up. Pushing against them was some impenetrable, unyielding force. So slowly, the Warrens backed down the stairs so as not to be knocked over backwards. And at the bottom of the stairs, for a brief second, diabolical laughter rang out. So, annoyed, Ed threw more holy water on the stairs, which caused the pressure to diminish enough to let them reach the top. They were able to bind almost all the rooms without incident, saving Meg's for last. Ed swung the door wide open, and he and Lorraine immediately felt the need to take a step back from the horrible sense of misery emanating from the room. With a steely composure, Ed walked into the room, cross in hand. Though no physical presence was there to be seen, the bedroom was freezing cold. One last time, Ed threw holy water in all four corners of the room, commanding, "Give us some sign of departure or an exorcism will be conducted here this very day." Almost instantly, the morbid sense of misery began to drain away, and the temperature in the room gradually returned to normal. So Meg's bedroom did contain those black conjuring candles, occult vestments, and books containing the rites for rituals of all sorts. Ed placed the items in the gal's trash basket, set them out in the hallway, and then sealed the room by reading a prescribed prayer of sanctification. He brought them back to his home for safekeeping, and that's one copy of the Ars Goetia I have no need to read. Thank you. See, I've told y'all, don't summon beings.
Number 3. The Cursed Brick. Perhaps one of the least terrifying items on this list is a brick from the Borley Rectory, aka a brick from one of the most haunted houses in all of England. The house was originally built back in 1862. It was a house built for the rector of Borley, but after a fire in 1939, it was never rebuilt. It was finally demolished after in 1944, but before its final days, Harry Price, a paranormal researcher at the time, reported numerous ghostly sightings, including a ghost nun, a ghost car passing by, as well as numerous horse and buggy sounds on the property. That's terrifying. Yep. A little piece of the haunted home sits in the Warren Occult Museum today, as they were able to visit the Borley Rectory before it was demolished. According to local folklore, a nun fell in love with a monk from the monastery, and the pair attempted to elope together. They were found and sentenced to death. The monk was reported to have been sent to the gallows in the monastery, whilst the nun was sealed into the walls of the nunnery alive. Ouch. This nun is believed to be the one that is seen on the grounds of the Borley Rectory, endlessly looking for the monk that she once loved. That's kind of cute. That's kind of nice. The nun has been seen and heard many times over the years, and the first reports came from 1928 when the owner Guy Eric Smith and his wife contacted a newspaper to report a strange happenings. The newspaper took on the help of an investigator, Mr. Harry Price. Mr. Price stayed at the house to research for more than a year. While staying there, Price witnessed a ton of poltergeist phenomena. Even said that he got in touch with the spirit of a past tenant, Reverend Harry Bull, who died in the house. After numerous attempts at exorcising the property, in 1930, Mr. and Mrs. Smith left the house for good. The next residents of the house were Reverend Foister and his wife Mary Ann. They both experienced the same phenomena that Price and the Smiths had witnessed before them. However, this time the poltergeist activity seemed to be a little bit more aggressive, with reports of smashed glasses, broken windows, and Mary Ann being even thrown from her bed in the middle of the night. In 1939, the house was burnt to the ground due to an oil lamp. It was then left to ruins until 1944, when it was demolished. The Borley Rectory was said to have been the most haunted building in all of the UK, so although just an unassuming brick, its origin story has seen quite a bit of life and death. Number 2. Black magic dolls. We already know some of the infamous museum dolls that are haunted by all hell, but we're not talking about Annabelle. There are apparently handfuls of other dolls that deserve some jarring honorable mentions. Tony Spera believes that there are dark powers that live amongst the various voodoo dolls and handmade figurines that are just casually splayed out for museum goers. Stuffed dolls like the Shadow Doll, of course, who looks like a night terror version of a twisted Muppets puppet. It's known for visiting dreamers and stopping their heart mid-nightmare with fear. Okay, that's a little excessive. So haunted, yeah. There's a satanic doll that looks like it would resemble a tall wooden man, possibly even the devil. Yeah, haunted beyond all hell. Found in the woods too, around satanic worship. Could you believe? And of course, this dark magic doll. They just look haunted, you know? That off-colorization look, the facelessness, and glass casing around it. Again, that can't be a good sign. Historically, if you do this, obtaining a doll or statue or carving, add in a little dash of dark magic and voodoo, and voila, you have a very dark, cursed item. There's also a doll with no mouth and no eyes. Yeah, that's not scary at all. I think we can all agree that there's like 20 origin films like right here with each and every one of these black magic figurines. Like I understand Furbies a little bit more now, you know? Like that's a cursed item right there, 100%. Furbies belong in the Warren Museum. I'm surprised there isn't some there already. And coming at the #1 spot, the music box. And of course we had to include one of the creepiest elements of the Conjuring movies, and I guess what makes any scary movie scary. It's the music. And boy is there one haunted creepy Warren Museum object that comes to mind: the Perron family music box. Director James Wan wanted to use the actual music box in the first film because mirrors and creepy music make for the best thrillers, but also because that there is a real haunted artifact from the real case. Today, the box is safely stored in the Warrens Museum alongside all of the other spooky items that we already covered. The music though, right? Like this part in the movie actually scared the shit out of me. Like the anticipation alone. They always do it so slow too, don't they? Dun 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 dun. But it's like real life though. That's horrifying. The music box apparently caused a lot of problems for these Perron girls, specifically April, the youngest of the Perron children. She found this antique in the house and she used to communicate to spirits. In the movie, this was a happy ending, but in real life, the Bathsheba Sherman curse was never really resolved. The original OG film, The Conjuring, was one of the best haunted house movies of the last decade that arguably spawned both a franchise and a new respect for old school horror. I wonder what's next for us in the James Wan universe, cause that werewolf paw, yeah, that looks terrifying.
Number 5 on this list is the Basino vase. The Basino vase is one of those old family heirlooms that you really don't want to get passed down to you. It started out as a wedding gift, also something that you really don't want to receive on your wedding day. Anyways, it's a pretty vase, so the couple accepted this vase and then tragedy struck. On the night of the wedding, after the ceremony, the bride was found dead in her room. It's said that she had her hands wrapped around this vase as she was dying, and in her final breaths before passing, vowed to have her revenge. This little vow at the end muddles things because we're not sure whether it was the vow that cursed the vase or if the vase was already cursed, but whatever. Adding it to the story makes it a little bit more interesting, so she cursed the vase. Either way, at this point nobody realized that the vase had anything to do with the death of the young bride, which is really too bad. The vase turned into a family heirloom and was passed from generation to generation. As you can imagine, it didn't go so great for those who received this. More people kept dying, all of them extremely mysteriously. Eventually, somebody caught on and decided that this vase needed to get locked up for good. For a time, it was locked up in a secret location and nobody knew where this vase was. It should have stayed that way though. The vase in 1988 saw the light of day again and was sold off to a wealthy bidder who basically just bought an extremely expensive way to die. He died very soon after receiving this vase, and thus it began all over again. The vase exchanged hands some more, killing off more and more people as it went. Finally, somebody with some proactive thinking gave it to the police. Now, nobody knows where it ended up. Whether the police destroyed it, hid it, or held onto it is anyone's guess. Number 4 on this list is the chained oak. This one is really interesting, and even though history hasn't necessarily hidden it from us, it's definitely tried to negate the consequences. Atlas Obscura says, the chained oak is an old tree wrapped in chains to prevent its branches from falling. This is due to an alleged curse put on the tree when, in 1821, the 15th Earl of Shrewsbury refused a woman's pleas for money. It's said that she then put a curse upon the nearby oak. For every branch that falls from the tree, a member of the Earl's family would die. Later that night, one of the Earl's relatives died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Convinced that the curse was true, the Earl ordered that the branches of the oak should be chained up to prevent more from falling. I feel for that Earl's family, man. Like literally, I'm just a grandkid of this dude, and now if this tree breaks a little bit, I'm gonna die? No thank you. At least the Earl had the sense to chain up the tree and make sure that it won't happen to harm his family. But one big storm rolls through that place and wham, now some random person is just dying. Just pray that you don't happen to be the descendant of this guy, and if you are, cross your fingers those chains were done up tight.
In third place, we have a shadow doll. Among one of the first haunted items visible to those who visit the Warren Occult Museum is a shadow doll, which boasts bird feathers and a genuine human tooth, and she's just overall terrifying to look at. I'm calling it now, she better join that TV universe one day. For reference, a shadow doll is a statue or deity of sorts that is made specifically for harm to be used at the center of curses. I happen to know the steps for the most common curse, and while I'll leave out a step for safety, I promise I'll elaborate. Now, the caster would first need to take a picture of the doll, write a curse on the back of the photo, and then send it to whoever the curse is aimed for. You know, hopefully you've got their mailing address. The person who receives the picture with the curse will sadly invite that curse into their lives. Oh, almost forgot. The doll is also going to appear in that person's dreams, so enjoy your nightmares, folks. While not too much is known about the origins of this specific doll, it was initially purchased in a secondhand store under the assumption that it was simply, an antique. I've got a couple of old dolls myself, and I'm shuddering to think about what they would do if activated by any kind of curse. Some of them talk enough already. In second place, we have black magic mask, which is a concept in theosophy, mysticism, and the paranormal, of a materialized thought form, typically in human form such as an imaginary friend or being that is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. In simpler English, the masks act as a representation of the practice, which is a form of mysticism that involves creating sentient and autonomous beings separate from oneself. The concept of tulpas and their creation, including the word tulpa, come from a closed Tibetan Buddhist practice, with tulpa being a Tibetan word for a creature of the mind. Tulpas did not become part of Western paranormal lore until around the 1970s, and those who practice have been cited as wearing masks similar to Halloween ones in order to take on the appearance of whatever the mask looks like. If anyone is curious about modern practices and appropriations of tulpamancers, the interweb origins can be traced back to 4chan message boards in 2009, and I'm not going to elaborate on just how awful that sentence was to utter. Oh, it gets worse. The communities gained popularity when adult fans of My Little Pony started discussing tulpas of characters from the Friendship is Magic television series. The fans attempted to use meditation and lucid dreaming techniques to create imaginary friends. Well, I think that about sums that up, don't you? In first place, we have the black lace veil. So after one of their many public lectures, Ed was conversing with a couple that had been in the audience, where the boy introduced himself as Alan and explained that he'd brought his girlfriend Lonnie to the lecture because he suspected that she'd been overtaken by some occult influence. He explained that when his girlfriend became angry, her features would change into something resembling a wolf, and then the voice of a different person would speak from inside her. When Lorraine walked over to join the group, Lonnie experienced an episode of instantaneous possession and lurched out in an attempt to attack Lorraine. This incident terrified everyone in the vicinity, with the Warrens ending the audience chat session immediately, before Ed escorted the couple to an offstage room while Lorraine stayed outside. In the backstage room, the girl was fully under possession, breathing heavily, and her facial features had transformed into the wolf-like appearance the boy had talked about. After about 10 minutes, the possession passed, and Lonnie was lucid enough to explain, dealing with memory loss, along with losing hours and days of her life over the last 3 months, which is a symptom common in possession. She went on to share that originally her now boyfriend, Alan, had refused all of her advances and bribery attempts at becoming hers, and she had resorted to visiting a store prominent in selling tools to help with witchcraft, purchasing there a book on the black arts, and later that night performing a ritual for acquiring lovers. This ritual involved, you guessed it, the black lace veil, on top of which she placed a crown of goat horns before renouncing God and her baptism, along with swearing allegiance to Satan, finishing the ritual by washing down the vow with a cup of animal scarlet elixir. About a month after Lonnie performed the ritual, Alan began paying her the attention she craved, making her entitled world perfect. What she hadn't counted on, however, was that she was now in debt to the demonic, having given them permission to enter her life. Ed knew immediately that Lonnie would have to undergo an exorcism as soon as possible, and made contact with a priest the next morning, who was able to come assist with the procedure. Upon arrival, the priest insisted on testing the spirit, so he instructed Lonnie to close her eyes and slowly count to 20, while his assistant stood behind her and placed a cross around 6 inches behind her head. The entity possessing the girl suddenly went wild, screaming, "Take it away! It burns! Take it away!" During the exorcism, it kept screaming, "She's mine! She's mine! Her soul is mine!" in reference to Lonnie. It was eventually separated from Lonnie, but just before it departed, the thing vowed it would return to another. The Warrens brought the black lace veil, goat horns, cup, and the conjuring book home with them so she would be safe from possession, but the tale of the veil doesn't end here. Months later, when Ed was in a meeting with a lady who was manifesting different personalities, some male, some female, and some that couldn't even be called human, but all making extremely threatening statements, her eyes began to wander, and when they landed on the black veil, she jumped up, grabbed the veil, and clutched it to her chest. Her features immediately began to transform into those of a wild, sneering creature distinct from the otherwise attractive girl. Ed drew 2 vials of water to himself, one unblessed, the other blessed by an exorcist, and moved away from what was no longer this woman, but an inhuman spirit, a lesser devil of hell. Horrid moaning and various animal sounds came from the girl as Ed blessed her, banishing the demon away for now a second and final time. And that brings us to the end of our list, and I'm glad all of those items are still kicking around the Warren Museum for safety and not out in the open.
Number 5 on this list is Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is one of the most haunted and cursed dolls on the entire planet. Ghosts and Gravestones says the story of Robert the Doll dates back to the early 1900s when a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll by a servant that worked for his parents in his home. Eugene, who everybody called Gene, named the doll Robert and quickly became attached to his new friend. The home where Eugene lived, now called the Artist's House, is located at 534 Eaton Street and was built between 1890 and 1898. It was here that Eugene was given Robert the doll and where a friendship that lasted throughout his lifetime and beyond was forged. While he seemed like an ordinary cloth doll, it wasn't long before Robert was involved in strange and somewhat terrifying events. The first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was only 10 years old, awoke to find Robert the doll sitting at the end of his bed, staring at him. Moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned in her son's bedroom. Gene cried for help, begging his mother to rescue him. When she was finally able to wrench the locked door open, she saw poor Gene curled up in fear on his bed, his room in shambles, and Robert the doll sitting at the foot of the bed. And all the child could say was Robert did it. Now, this was the first instance where Robert was acting up, but there have been tons of experiences since then where this doll is just doing things that really shouldn't be doing. He now lives in East Martello where visitors flock to see him, although it's a bad idea. There are letters and notes all around Robert from people that have come to see him, all begging for Robert's forgiveness. Apparently, taking a picture of Robert without his permission will cause him to start to haunt you. This curse has affected hundreds to thousands of people, and they all usually end up coming back to Robert begging for freedom from this curse. At this point, paranormal investigators have learned that messing with Robert really isn't the best idea, and just leaving this doll alone, probably the smartest thing to do. Number 4 on this list is the screaming skull. Last I checked, if there is no meat on the bone, then a skull shouldn't be screaming. That's kind of what's going down with this one extremely haunted skull in Burton Agnes Hall, England. Instablog says, what if you touch an object and then you hear terrible, deafening screams? That is precisely what happens when you touch this skull at an Elizabethan manor in England. Burton Agnes Hall is the house of Catherine Ann Griffith, who was brutally murdered by numerous bullies in 1620. Her skull still rests inside the house. Why? Because whenever somebody tried to take it out of the house, what happened next terrified them to the bone. People who have tried to touch or disturb that skull have reported seeing a scary ghost walk in and utter a deafening scream. This scared the people so much that they actually ran out of the house in terror. If you're up for a scary challenge, then this might be your chance to prove your mettle to the world, but for the weak-hearted ones, it's wise to stay away. And yeah, guys, I mean, I agree with that article right there. Probably best not to mess with this thing. I mean, a bunch of paranormal investigators won't even go here anymore. If a bunch of paranormal investigators think that this area is too scary for them, then sorry guys, I'm tapping out. It's way too scary for me too. Number 3 on this list is the baker's wedding dress. Marriage is supposed to be one of the happiest times of your life. Finding that partner you intend to spend the rest of your life with and then actually doing just that. Therefore, one of the happiest days of your life should be the day that all of this becomes official. Your wedding day. That's why it's particularly sad when tragedy or drama occurs on the day of said wedding. Just that is exactly what happened with Anna Baker. Scoop Whoop says, inside the Baker Mansion in Altoona, USA is the wedding dress of Anna Baker, who fell in love with an ironworker. Legends claim that Anna eloped from her home to get married to her lover, but her father forcibly brought her back and locked her in her bedroom. She then refused to marry anyone else and spent the rest of her life alone. After her death, the members of the Baker family reported spotting Anna's wedding dress at different places around the house. Some of them even saw the spirit of Anna Baker moving around the house dressed in that same wedding dress. Imagine literally getting forced back home and locked in your room by your father as you're getting married. It's no wonder that Anna was pissed and why this specific object has become very cursed. Now it's locked up in a case and hidden from the world in the Baker Mansion. It's a good thing that it is, because what Scoop Whoop didn't talk about is the fact that this dress can actually be dangerous. As ridiculous as it actually sounds, it has reportedly tried to strangle people in their sleep before. I know that the image of a floating wedding dress trying to suffocate somebody is kind of humorous, but I promise you that you wouldn't be laughing if it happened to you. I like that this thing is locked up, but would be far more comfortable if we just threw it in the fire and we're done with it completely. Number 2 on this list is the Anguished Man painting. The Anguished Man painting is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, a painting of a man in some very clear anguish. The thing is that this man doesn't really look all that human. He hardly has any facial features at all and almost looks a bit like a burn victim. Also, where his eyeballs should be, there's just these 2 gaping holes, and his mouth also looks like one giant hole with no end. Even without the haunting associated with this picture, it's already pretty scary, and I personally have no idea why anyone would want it in their home. That's exactly what Sean Robinson did though, and he quickly suffered the consequences. Scoop Whoop says, fascinated by the charm of the Anguished Man painting, Sean Robinson inherited the painting from his grandmother and decided to hang the painting on the wall of his house. Soon after that, Sean and his family started experiencing paranormal events like cracking of the doors in the middle of the night and sudden blood-curdling screams from nowhere. Sean's wife decided to investigate the origin of the painting and found that the artist who painted the painting killed himself, and before doing that, he mixed his own blood with the paint that he used in making the painting. Learning this, the couple decided to hide the painting in the basement of their house in Cumbria. So, the first thing about this story that is kind of questionable is how anybody could be fascinated by the charm of this thing. It's gross, and I don't like looking at it, let alone having it hanging in my home. The second thing that's super questionable is why we decided to hide it. I swear, none of these people have ever heard of fire before, guys. Like, great, thank you for hiding it from the world, this is helpful, but what would be even more helpful is if we just took a match and burned it so nobody ever has to deal with it again. I apologize to the artist who painted this thing, but if you're gonna use your own blood and make a haunted painting, then come on, man, kinda deserves to be burned. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Thomas Busby chair. This chair is freaking deadly, man, and even though it's pretty much safe from public use now, I still hate that it exists. Scoop Whoop says, popularly known as Busby's stoop chair, this wooden furniture is cursed by the spirit of Thomas Busby, who was known to ruthlessly murder people. Before getting hanged for his crimes, he requested to have a meal in his favorite local pub. Upon finishing his meal, he stood and said, "May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit on my chair." And ever since then, 63 people who dared to sit on the chair met untimely and terrifying deaths. Later, the owner of the pub donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum UK, and it's still there, hung 1.5 meters off the ground to prevent any further deaths. Can you imagine owning that pub and being like, oh, no worries, 60 people have died in this chair, all is good. Like, how the heck did we allow 63 separate people to sit in this chair and die? And, okay, like, I'm happy that it's hanging 1.5 meters off the ground and nobody can sit in it, but guys, come on. This is literally a dangerous weapon that we have right here. The fact that this thing hasn't been totally dismantled is kind of ridiculous. What happens if somebody steals this chair and then decides, you know what, I'm gonna murder people with it without anybody finding out? Frankly, I think history should have hidden this thing a little bit better. Hopefully we don't hear any more murderous stories about it from here on out.